All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to talk about Deebo Samuel, the 49ers, requesting a trade, and it looks like he's going to be playing elsewhere in 2025. So, Deebo Samuel did not have a great year. He didn't. He was kind of a shell of himself. And, it's surprising because, he is a good player, and just to see him going through these struggles, it was odd. But then again, you look at the 49ers, and it's just a lot of players struggled. A lot of guys also struggled to stay on the field. Also, I was reminded as I was going through social media, the Devondre Campbell situation, the Niners suspended him. It was a forgettable year for the 49ers. But when it comes to Deebo Samuel, he also had those instances where he posted on social media and talked about how he wasn't getting the ball. And then you could see, against the Rams, in that bad weather game on that Thursday night, they were trying to get him the ball, and, it just wasn't working out. He had that drop in that game. Against the Dolphins, he had one of his best games of the season. I think that was the following week. But he just wasn't the same. Now, I don't think he's washed because, he was also running back kick returns, and he still has that game-breaking speed. It's just when he would get the ball on offense, it's just he wasn't really getting anything going. And then, like I said, his drops were a problem too. Like I said, the potential touchdown against the Rams he dropped. I mean, that was a walk-in touchdown. There was balls that went through his hands against the Packers. It was a mess. It was a mess of a season for not just him, but for the Niners. And now you kind of look at the 49ers and their situation, and, they got some things to decide. We could be seeing, Kyle Juszczyk getting cut this offseason. You got players getting older. George Kittle's getting up there in age. And you also have these, receivers, this receiver room. Brandon Ayuk's coming back next year. You got Ricky Pearsall going into his sophomore season. And Jawan Jennings as well. I mean, odds are Deebo Samuel is expendable. They could definitely move off of him. He could be the odd man out. And on top of that, Christian McCaffrey, the Niners are hoping they get him back healthy. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really have a problem with this. I think the 49ers, they can move off of Deebo, and, they'll be okay next year if everybody's healthy. If the defense is healthy too, getting guys back to 100% like Nick Bosa, because I know he was banged up. He was dealing with that hip injury. Yeah, I keep saying it. It was a rough year for the Niners. I think Deebo could go elsewhere and be successful. I still believe he's got good football left. Like I said, the drops were an issue, but I still think he's got, the game-breaking speed that we've seen over the course of his career still. But where would he go? The Commanders come to mind. I feel like with that offense, they could, move him around. And, I mean, he's a guy that's, he's not that deep ball receiver. He's not that contested catch receiver. But, he's someone that, could be a slot guy. I feel like, and you got Terry McLaurin there, who's the deep ball guy. So, I feel like that could work. I'm trying to see what other destinations. The Patriots, that I saw that could be a possible option. Look, the Patriots got a ton of cap space, and they need to continue to surround Drake May with as much talent as possible. And I think the Patriots are in for a big offseason. You got the head coach. I like the Josh McDaniels move. Now it's all about surrounding your young quarterback with talent. And I think, Deebo Samuel maybe could work there for Drake May. I'm trying to see who else, because I know I had an article that, there were teams that were listed. I think the Steelers were also a possible destination. The Steelers need help at that position. So it's possible they go that route. But we'll see. The other thing too is, Brandon Ayuk is coming back from an ACL and MCL injury, so he's not going to be 100% to start off the year. So you trade Deebo and Jawan Jennings. Remember the game against the Rams early on in the season? The games Jawan Jennings had, didn't he? What do you have? 3 touchdowns in the game. So you got him. you got Ricky Pearsall, you got George Kittle. If McCaffrey's healthy, I mean, they could probably get by until Brandon Ayuk, gets his legs back underneath him. Or maybe you keep Deebo around for that reason. I don't know. We'll see. But Deebo back in 2021 had a solid year. 77 receptions, 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns. But then he also had 8 more touchdowns, and these were rushing touchdowns. That was when he was kind of like a hybrid player. They were using him out of the backfield and, as a receiver. That was his best. And he got a first-team All-Pro that season, too. And he became just the 3rd player in NFL history to have 1,000 receiving yards with at least 5 touchdowns rushing and 5 more receiving. And then so this is overall. He has 334 receptions for 4,792 yards and 22 touchdowns, along with 202 carries for 1,143 rushing yards and 20 touchdowns in his career. Those 20 rushing scores are the most by a wide receiver since at least 1960. This is courtesy of ESPN.com. But this is during the 4-game stretch against the Seahawks, the Packers, the Bills, and the Bears. So he had just 97 yards from scrimmage on 17 touches. He finished with 21 yards, 20 yards, and 35 yards in those games. It was the first time Samuel failed to have at least 50 yards from scrimmage in 4 straight games since a 5-game stretch in his rookie season in 2019. And, I talked about the social media post. He deleted this, but this was on December 9th. He said, not struggling at all, just not getting the ball. But he was struggling because, balls were going through his hands. He was dropping passes. It just was not good. It's not good. He was struggling. But I do agree with him I do agree with him, though. He also wasn't getting the ball, but when he would get the ball, he just wouldn't do anything with it. But looking at his stats, though, from this season, he had 806 scrimmage yards and 4 touchdowns. Both career lows, but you could look at the 2020 season, but he only played 7 games. He was injured that season. And, they signed him to a 3-year extension, in August of 2022. But, yeah, they could be looking to move off of him. But, yeah, disappointing year for him. I think he can bounce back from it. I feel like I'm always Mr. Positive when it comes to a lot of these guys. But, I do think maybe a change of scenery is best for him. Because, again, the 49ers got these other players on the team. And, I feel like, and on top of that, too, they got to worry about paying Brock Purdy. They're going to have to pay him. I think they will pay him. We had this conversation again yesterday. I know they're going to have to pay him, but there's got to be a way that they can work on a team-friendly deal. Like, is Brock Purdy really going to price himself at $50 to $60 million a year? Now, I think if he goes out in 2025 and he has this unbelievable season and the 49ers, get to the Super Bowl again, then, maybe we have a different conversation. But I am not looking to pay Brock Purdy $50 to $60 million a year. I'm just not. He's not worth that kind of money. And I like Brock Purdy a lot. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he receives a ton of heat, which is unwarranted, but I understand it. He's not a $50, $60 million quarterback. He's not. So that's another reason why they can move off him. And that's why I brought up, them possibly, cutting Kyle Juszczyk because, they need to, save some money because, they're going to have to do something with Purdy at some point. It's going to be interesting. I just hope it's not something that drags like the Brandon Ayuk stuff, like I said, because, if you guys watch those shows from last year, it was like I talked about Brandon Ayuk so much, and I was getting sick and tired of it. But this is a different situation now, because now Deebo Samuel is just looking to get traded, as opposed to looking for a new contract. But we'll see what happens. And I don't think the 49ers want to move off of Deebo. They want to keep this band together, because I think a healthy 49ers squad next year, they are going to be back in the postseason. I don't think the window is closed on them yet. They still got a lot of great players on this team. They're going to need to, I think make smart decisions this offseason with, whether it's free agency or the draft. But I do think if this team is healthy next year, they're going to be the team that we saw similar to what made the Super Bowl a couple years ago now, you could say, or last year. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But Deebo Samuel, it is likely that he might not be a 49er, which is going to be weird, but it happens. But let me know what you guys think. Where could Deebo possibly end up? Let me know in the comments. And with that, that is pretty much it for the show for today. A lot of stuff to cover. We talked about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, where they could end up, and, Kellen Moore taking the Saints job. The Mahomes legacy conversation is going to be a conversation that's going to be had a lot. Because that did not sit right with me. I really don't look at him the same way again. I don't. I really don't. I not in terms of him being an all-time great, but just when we talk about the greatest of all time, I don't look at him the same way. I think he's going to be looked at as one of the greatest, but like I said earlier in the show, it could be an overreaction, but I don't know. It's hard to come back from 2 blowout losses in the Super Bowl. That's on the grand stage. Everybody's watching. This isn't like a 1 p.m. game on Fox and only a select group of people are watching. This was on the national stage. This was on the Super Bowl, the biggest game of the year, and they didn't score until the end of the third quarter. And at that point, it was 34-0. So, and there's more conversations to be had with this game, and we'll talk more about. We'll talk about some stuff tomorrow. We'll talk about the Eagles' defense and how it stacks up amongst the greatest performances of all time in the Super Bowl. I want to have that conversation. There's still a lot to be had with that game, and it needs to be, because we're in the off season now too. And then also, like we just talked about, Deebo, where he could end up. So we're in the off season now. So now it's just got to get creative, and we're going to get to free agency. There'll be a ton of stuff to cover. Like I said, we're going to talk about a lot of things. Biggest disappointments from the year, teams that were really disappointing, overviews on the seasons, and also take a look at my predictions to start the year and how they turned out, because they really didn't turn out. I had the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, and that didn't happen. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day. And as always, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.